In 2006, Traveler's Tales released a third-person LEGO shooter called Bionicle Heroes. A blaster-filled action game, no dialogue, no slapstick humor, just robots, lasers, and mask of power. I'm Reisigo, and today we're shooting our way through Bionicle Heroes. This is game 78 of my challenge to beat every single GameCube game, and then review it. So what the heck even is Bionicle? Bionicle was a line of LEGO construction toys created by Chris Faber and Bob Thompson. The concept for Bionicles originated from an idea originally called Cybots, which was not something that I was even familiar with. When Faber was interviewed about Bionicle, he recalled sitting with LEGO Technic and thought, I would love to build a character instead of a car. And then he went on to talk about how the human body is made up of small parts that make one functional body. So what if he got a box full of spare parts and built a living thing? Voila, the design for Toos were born. During that time, Faber pitched his idea, but he didn't have any success. The idea was good, but it just wasn't quite there yet. So after a few rewrites and reworks, Faber was paired with Bob Thompson on a project known as the Boneheads of Voodoo Island. With the addition of Bob and a LEGO team, the concept was rewritten with a new story, and the concept was adjusted where it was finally approved at the end of the year 2000. The name Bionicle comes from the words biological and chronicle mashed together. Bionicle was released when LEGO was struggling and were on a nearly decade-long downturn in the late 90s. But quickly after Bionicle's released, it became one of the best-selling toy lines for the company. Mostly because instead of just building like with normal Legos, Bionicle was given an elaborate story with expansive lore. This was centered around the half-organic, half-robotic characters, and then telling that story over vast multimedia spectrums, including things like comic books, novels, games, films, and online content. All of this led into the development of the game we're playing today for this episode, Bionicle Heroes. Bionicle Heroes ended up being developed by Traveler's Tales and published by Enos Interactive, then was finally released to the world on November 14, 2006, and was one of the latest releases for the Nintendo GameCube. Now that we know the history of Bionicle, let's talk about the story of Bionicle Heroes. A non-canon story that doesn't tie in with any of the lore of the series. I thought this was an interesting choice, but I'm not sure how they could have made a convincing story with this game. The goal of TT Games was to include as many characters as possible from the universe into one single game, so that's just what they tried to do. Bionicle Heroes takes place on a fictional island, Avalia Nu. We play as an anonymous hero who randomly appears on the island. A villager that lives on the island named Balta tells us that 6 Pyrica have taken control of the island and turned all the inhabitants into monsters. Besides himself, I guess? I'm not sure why he was spared from this, but for the plot, he was protected from that nonsense. Baltus gives us a mask, this turns us into a Toa. I know nothing about Bionicle, so I had no idea what was even happening during most of this game. The terms they use when talking about characters and just the things that happen in the universe had me confused about the story for most of the game. Anyway, since we're now a Toa, we're tasked with taking down and defeating all 6 Pyrica. The entirety of the story in this game is told to us with cutscenes before specific levels in the game, and since there isn't really any dialogue, the player is tasked with watching and deciding what each cutscene even means. For the most part, the cutscenes just involve showing us the new Pyrica. Then after completing a few levels in their zone, that Pyrica finds out that we're looking for them, and then in the final level of that zone, we have a boss fight with them, with cutscenes before the fight telling us who they are and their personality, and then we'll get one final cutscene of them after the boss fight, showing off how they were defeated. I think that about covers the story for this game. I would say this is probably the weakest aspect of this game, which means you're going to experience a lot of mindless shooting throughout this one, without much substance of what we're doing or why we're doing it. I'm just gonna go ahead and ask this here. Does knowing about Bionicle and its lore make the story for this game any better? Anyone that has played this one, I'd love to know down in the comments. Bionicle Heroes has an interesting art direction, mixing an almost realistic background and world, but with the characters and enemies looking like Legos. So it ends up allowing the characters to stand out from the background with their almost cartoonish look, but I think I would have been more of a fan of the art style if everything was just the same. I feel like a LEGO only approach would have been the best option, but I'm not sure how true that is to the source material of Bionicle. Either way, I think the game looks pretty good for its age, and I didn't have to try and figure out what something was when I was playing it. So overall, I'm happy with the art style. Now let's move into the music and sounds for this game. The music in this game is actually very good. There is a total of 31 different tracks that play at different times throughout the game. However, the game has some sound balancing problems because the gameplay sounds are extremely loud in comparison to the music. So most of the music ends up being drowned out. And since we're basically always shooting in this game, we never really get to hear how good the music is. And instead, we get to hear some of the worst sounding guns in the history of video games. Multiple times throughout my playthrough of this game, my ears felt like they were actually going to bleed from how loud and terrible the gun sounds were. The rest of the world and characters have good sound. Some of those sounds even have the ability to help get the humor over that's in this game. Outside of the gun sounds, I think the rest of this game has solid sound work and music. It's honestly a shame that the music from this game is drowned out and wasn't used for a game of better quality. At its core, Bionicle Heroes is a third-person shooter, but with LEGO game physics. You'll constantly be moving through each level, shooting all the enemies that appear, and collecting studs that spill out of everything. And I mean everything. Enemies, objects, and just about anything else we can destroy drops studs. The gameplay loop ends up being very simple and honestly a bit satisfying at times. If I had played this on the Nintendo DS, the game would have been a first-person shooter. If I had played this game on the Game Boy Advance, it would have been a top-down run-and-gun adventure. It's interesting that they decided to develop 3 different versions of this game, instead of just not releasing it on those other platforms. Anyhow, the biggest mechanic this game has to offer is the mask system. Each mask represents one of the 6 TOA: fire, water, earth, ice, stone, and air. Each one of the masks has its own unique weapon to use and some sort of special ability. The fire mask has a rapid fire blaster and can walk through lava. The water mask has homing shots and can swim in the water. The earth mask makes use of heavy explosives. The ice mask acts as a sniper using a long-range beam. The stone mask turns us into a grenadier, mainly with cluster grenades. And the last mask, the air mask, allows us to use quick-shooting dual pistols. We're able to switch each mask on the fly, and if we lose all of our health with any one of the masks, then we lose the one we're using, and we'll have to find it again somewhere later in the level. That is if you want access to it again. This acts as a risk-reward system, which should help with the repetitive gameplay, but since this game is extremely easy, I rarely ever lost a mask, so it didn't really help me much with variety. At the top of the screen, we have a hero meter, and this fills up after collecting studs throughout the level. We can then trigger hero mode, which is a temporary invincible power-up, where our character glows gold, allowing us to explode enemies instantly. This is extremely overpowered, but something that makes me feel like we're in an old school 80s action movie or something. This mode is extremely helpful in boss fights or when faced with a bunch of enemies at the same time. This game also plays a song in hero mode that reminds me of that old science movies we had to watch in middle school. I think it was called like Infinite Discovery or something. I can't fully remember. Each zone that we enter has multiple levels, usually based on some sort of theme. Fire, water, jungle, stone, earth, and ice, but they all follow a similar structure. They all have linear corridors, platforming segments, and combat areas, as well as combat arenas where we have to defeat all the enemies to advance. The environments don't usually have much going on in them, but there are LEGO construction sections where we're given the opportunity to build a specific item to open new paths or even reveal some secret areas. There are collectibles called gold canisters scattered around each level, and I tried my best to get as many of these as possible, but sometimes you won't have the mask you need to get them, so you'll have to go back through that level again just to pick them up. So I just ended up ignoring the ones I couldn't get. While the gameplay loop is repetitive, having some visual variety really helps make the game feel different. For example, when going through the fire level, it's filled with lava and steam, whereas the water level has a bluer aesthetic and large portions with water. Even though this game is from 2006, the graphics actually surprised me with how good they look at times. The biggest downside for me for most of these levels is there just isn't much of a chance to fail. The AI for the enemies is extremely bad, the checkpoints make sure you don't lose much if you were to die, and by having so many masks, it's nearly impossible to actually lose while playing anyways. Between each level of every zone, we're returned to a hub area known as Voya New. In this area, we can check out collectibles, upgrade our weapons and masks using the studs we collected, unlock secrets, and just hang out and listen to the music if we please. Upgrading weapons doesn't feel needed in my opinion because the base damage does the job just fine, but it does help speed up how quickly we can move through each level, as well as unlocking new abilities with each mask. That aside, after completing each zone, we're greeted with a unique boss battle. It's always going to end up being against one of the 6 Pyrrhicas, the main evil dudes in the game. We have to face Zaktan, Velzoff, Hakan, Redak, Throk, and Avak. I don't know the lore, so I probably said every one of those names wrong. Please correct me in the comments so I know for the future. Each boss looks different, and I actually like most of the designs, but the boss fights all end up feeling the same. You dodge their attack until something starts to glow, then you attack that spot until you can't anymore, and then you repeat the cycle. I personally would have wanted more from the boss fights, but I think they're just fine for the complexity of the game. For the boss fights, the only thing to note is that each fight has a special thing related to one of your masks. One might have you wear the Earth Mask to destroy the debris, and another one might have you use the Air Mask to dodge lasers. It's something you'll need to figure out, but it's nice that at least there's a bit of variety in these fights. Your reward for beating each boss fight is that you gain their elemental mask. Also, once you defeat all the bosses, we can finally go and fight the final boss of the game, Vizon. This boss fight is extremely underwhelming, and honestly, it just comes down to shooting the tail of this spider-like machine until it breaks off. Then once that happens, we need to shoot off each one of its legs until its head explodes, causing it to fall into a pool of lava. For some reason, it's been standing in this pool of lava for the whole fight. Now that the spider creature is down, we can finally have our one-on-one showdown with Vizon. And he's forced to fight us like a real machine, metal on metal in a showdown for the ages. Actually, he doesn't, because he's for some reason handcuffed to his mount. I'm not sure why, but he is. So he stands on its remains and just tries to throw things at us. All we have to do is continue to shoot his dead mount so that he'll fall into the lava himself and burn up. This part is extremely easy, as all we have to do is run in a circle around the arena and continue to shoot the whole time, slowly breaking the remains of his mount, until we get a cutscene showing him slowly sinking into the lava. After that cutscene, we return back to the gameplay. All we have to do is just stand around and wait for him to fully sink into the lava, which we end up getting to see in a cutscene anyways. In this moment, he realizes that he's done for, melts away, and we're awarded the final mask of the game. That's it. That's the end of Bionicle Heroes. The credits roll with a dance party of all these different Bionicles raving, and we finished the game for the challenge. In conclusion, this game wasn't critically acclaimed, and I didn't love all the aspects of the game, but it had a lasting impact on how LEGO games would be developed into the future. Bionicle Heroes ended up having mechanics and elements that still carry over to modern LEGO video games coming out 3 generations of video games later. The combat system that they use currently is heavily inspired by Bionicle Heroes, as well as the over-the-shoulder camera. Some games like LEGO Batman and LEGO Indiana Jones still use a modern version of the hero mode from this game. So I don't think this game was perfect, but it really helped LEGO get out of the slump that they were in, and that led them into making some of the best kids games in the modern era. I would consider Bionicle Heroes to be LEGO's experimental phase. It was their way to test out what worked and what didn't work with a more action-focused game. And by no means is this game perfect, but it proved that LEGO games could do more than just be puzzle platformers. So would I consider Bionicle Heroes to be some sort of hidden gem? Probably not, but it was fun to see early concepts from modern LEGO games being tested in something that felt completely different. So I would recommend Bionicle Heroes on the GameCube. I feel that whether you're a Bionicle fan or not, this one is worth revisiting. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit that like button, subscribe for more GameCube retrospectives, and let me know in the comments if you've ever played this one, and if you have, which mask was your absolute favorite. Until next time, stay mechanical.